Hi everybody, thank you for joining us today. My name is Darlene McLennan and I'm the Manager of the Australian Disability Clearinghouse in Education and Training, ADCET for short. Firstly, I'd like to start by acknowledging that I'm coming to you from Lutchwinner, Tasmania, Aboriginal land, sea and waterways. And I want to acknowledge with deep respect the traditional custodians of the land, the Palawa people. The Palawa people belong to the oldest continuing culture in the world. They cared and protected country for thousands of years. They knew this land, they lived on the land, and they died on these lands. I honour them. I want to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and to the Aboriginal community that continue to care for country. I stand for a future that profoundly respects and acknowledges Aboriginal perspectives, culture, language and history, and a continued effort to fight for Aboriginal justice and rights, paving for a strong future. So thank you once again for joining us. Today's webinar is how Ideamapper helps students of varying disabilities plan, write and reference, and is facilitated by a dear friend of ours, Jim Spiralis, who has presented many webinars for us over a number of years. And I encourage you to look Jim up on our website and see those and search them out because they're always informative. Before I ask Jim to introduce our speaker today, I just wanted to highlight a few housekeeping details. For those who haven't joined us before, we are being live captioned today by Bradley Reporting, and the webinar will be recorded, and the recording will be available on ADCET in the coming days. To activate the closed captions, click on the CC button in the toolbar that is located either on the top or the bottom of your browser or your screen. We also have captions available via a browser, and Jane has just popped that into the chat pod. If you have any technical difficulties throughout, you can email us at admin@adcet.edu.au. Our speaker Callum is going to talk for around 45 minutes today, and then we'll open up to questions. Throughout the presentation, you can ask those questions that I'll ask at the end in the Q&A box. But then also, if you want to chat to us, you can also use the chat pod and choose all panelists and attendees so everybody else can see you. Jim's kindly offered to answer any chats that people may have throughout, and he'll be popping some other information up into that chat box, so keep an eye on that. But if you're wanting to ask Callum a question at the end, please use the Q&A box. Okay, I think that's it from me, Jim, so I'll hand over to you to do the introduction. Thank you.
Thank you, Darlene, and thank you to all of you who've joined us today. And yes, as Darlene's mentioned, I have regularly presented ADCET webinars, as most of you would be aware, on behalf of Sonocent. But Sonocent is just one part of my work in my role as an assistive technology and education consultant in schools, higher education. I also do some work for clients through disability employment services with their assistive technology provision. You know, that's all come about from my role as the state manager for our education department here in South Australia in assistive technologies. And so I am across a lot of technologies and have credentialing with, you know, Dragon and Text Help and so on. And I'm really excited to add Ideamapper to that portfolio of robust technologies that I really feel have great benefit for students who are neurodiverse. I'll expand on why I'm excited to be joining Ideamapper. I've just recently got on board with Callum and the team because in my work as an educationalist in the last 30 years, mind mapping's been a big part of my strategy provision for students to support them with becoming better writers using mind mapping technique and technologies. But I'll talk about that and flesh that out in the chat box. But I'd like to hand over to Callum. Callum Ferguson is the Sales and Marketing Manager at Ideamapper. And thank you so much, Callum, for reaching out to me to talk about the benefits of Ideamapper and actually start to address, is it really being utilised as much as we'd like to in not just schools, but in higher education. And Callum will give you more information. So over to you. Thank you, Callum.
Thank you, Jim. Hello, everyone. Yeah, my name's Callum Ferguson. I'm the Sales and sort of Marketing Manager at Ideamapper. I'm coming to you from Northwest England at the moment. It's pretty early in the morning, as you can see behind me. The sun's just kind of coming up, and Yeah, lovely summer morning. So yeah, I've got about a 45-minute presentation for you all. I want to discuss the benefits of mind mapping and specifically the benefits of Ideamapper. You know, what we set out to achieve, you know, how we help students, the many different markets that we are integrated with. And yeah, and I'm going to show you how the program works. It's not going to be purely PowerPoint based. I'm going to be moving between PowerPoint and the actual program. But before I get started, I'm just going to read a little bit about me and who I am and all the rest of it. But I wanted to put a question out there about mind mapping. You know, how many of you have actually used mind mapping in the past, whether that be pen and paper, you know, traditional way of mind mapping, or whether you've used some sort of software or recommend software to your students. You know, how many people out there are really familiar with that? So straight away, we've got people saying yes, inspiration. So I'll address our relationship with inspiration soon. But that's brilliant. So I'll let people start to respond in that chat box. Just to clarify, there are two boxes. There's a chat box and a Q&A box. And if you could put it in the chat box, that's the one I've got up on my screen.
And Callum, sorry, just also if people want to choose all panelists and attendees, then we all get to see their response as well, which would be great.
Okay, lovely. So while them answers are coming through, yeah, I'm Callum, Sales and Marketing Manager. Been here for about 5 years, and I specialise in our education sector. So we have education sector, we have our education AT, and then our professional sector as well. Because as you can imagine, mind mapping as a concept is, you know, quite applicable in many different industries. So we have about 5 editions to reflect that. Yeah, so I've spent the last sort of couple of years at the very least integrating Ideamapper into assistive technology platforms, particularly in the UK. So we have a scheme called the Disabled Student Allowance, which is funding students with specific learning disabilities in university and college, which is higher education, and also Access to Work, which is the workplace adult version, if you would. So yeah, two very interesting schemes that I really work alongside with quite regularly. And yeah, my focus this year is to make Ideamapper as accessible as possible. I'll explain this later on, but Ideamapper itself was originally created for students with dyslexia, dyspraxia, specific learning disabilities, students with neurodiversity. And that's ultimately why we ended up in the AT, you know, the assistive technology market. But as we grow and as we become more integrated with assistive technology, you know, we want to make it more accessible in many ways. That's including accessible with other AT programs, and includes features that I will discuss later on. So yeah, in this presentation, I'm going to outline the unique, innovative features of Ideamapper that help address the cognitive challenges of note-taking, grasping complex learning concepts, and constructing written assignments across all areas. I'm just going to move back to the chat box. So pen and paper, Viso, old school pen and paper, yeah, pen and paper. Lovely. That gives me quite a good idea of how many people have used it. So just wanted to see if anyone hadn't used mind mapping really, which is good. No one's really said that they haven't used mind mapping in the past. It is a great way of mind mapping to as a learning tool and an organisational tool, and just to get your thoughts out onto a piece of paper. So that's great. I will discuss inspiration later on as well. Let's move over the slide. Okay, so Jim's already given an introduction into who he is, and that's great. So yeah, Jim's come on board with the team. He's going to be sort of our man on the ground, if you would, in Australia. It's our aim for the next 12 months to work with Jim and to get as many universities and higher education establishments to trial Ideamapper, whether that be in a small team or across the entire university. It's how we've managed to get into markets, previously, is by giving out trials, getting people using it, getting people's feedback. Every country is different. All the the templates, the supporting documentation that it provides with the document, with the program, is always different depending on the country of origin and all the rest of it. So I feel like it is really important to work with people, who've been brought up through the education industry in that sector, and also who work there as well, who are really engulfed in that area. So I'll mention it at the end, but Ideamapper are currently offering free pilot trials to universities and higher education industries for the remainder of 2020. So that's a loose term. So I know this was originally organised before the pandemic, so that is a little bit more flexible. To allow students to have access to an effective mind mapping technology during these challenging times as well. So like I said, we'll discuss that at the end with Jim, but there's something to bear in mind as we go through this presentation. And I won't read the next paragraph because Jim's just explained that. But yeah, it's great to work with Jim. He's a great guy. So what is Ideamapper? I'm just going to get straight into it now. So Ideamapper was originally created as a solution for students with specific learning disabilities. The original aim was how do we get students who struggle with writing large amounts of text, particularly in higher education, that tends to be where students really write long reports and essays. It was mainly students who struggled with getting the thoughts down. You tend to find that students with dyslexia, dyspraxia, neurodiversity have a lot of ideas, a lot of content in their head, a lot of creativity. The downfall is really when it comes to putting it onto a piece of paper. You get that blank page syndrome, where you've got a white piece of paper in front of you and you're not entirely sure where to start. And even if when you do start, you've done 1,000 words and the content maybe spot on, but the order's completely messed up and it doesn't really make much sense. So that's the solution that we wanted to provide. That's the problem we wanted to tackle. It was designed by PhDs and a dyslexia expert with a MBE for services to dyslexia and other hidden disabilities. So it's kind of a love child of about 3 people. So Ideamapper uses mind mapping to help students manage information in bite-size format, helping to unlock ideas. Includes a vast array of templates and writing frames. So again, you'll see all this as I move through the presentation. But obviously, being an essay writing software, we have a lot of pre-built essays in there. We have a lot of essay templates, so people can just get started with whether it's a 5-point essay or a 10-point essay, where you can have introduction, 3 main arguments, and then conclusion and referencing. And like I mentioned earlier, it's my aim for this year to get Ideamapper fully AT compatible. So we already work with Dragon to a certain extent, Jaws to a certain extent, and TextHelp and Claro all to a certain extent. But I really want to make that as integrated as possible. We do have features like text-to-speech already built in. We are continually developing that feature, but don't really want to try and reinvent the wheel when there's plenty of other companies out there who specialize in text-to-speech or speech-to-text. So being integrated with that is a really important thing for me to achieve this year. So before I move into how to use Ideamapper and how all that sort of works, I just want to discuss the benefits of mind mapping itself as a concept. So like I just mentioned earlier, learners who have dyslexia typically function at a high level, however, have an issue with reading, spelling, writing, short-term memory, concentration, and processing information. which is a fairly common thing if you have dyslexia or some sort of neurodiversity. You know, it may not be all of them things, but it may be a select few. And if you've got short-term memory issues or spelling issues, then that will dramatically affect the outcome of your essay or report, regardless of how much research or content you've got. Like I said, dyslexic students typically function at a high level, but the shortcomings will be reflected in a writing format, like a report or an essay. One proven method to support dyslexic students is with mind mapping. So I mentioned earlier that the team who actually set up Ideamapper, the lady with the MBE, my boss, she was originally a dyslexic tutor. She owned a dyslexic school, and before technology was really all that advanced, mind mapping was one of the main main sort of strategies that she'd use to help students plan out, whether it's planning out the day or planning out, an essay or whatever it is. It was a great planning tool, and support tutors all across the world still use mind mapping, whether it is technology based or whether it is just on a pen and paper. It's a fantastic tool to use, especially in supporting students with neurodiversity. Mind mapping can be more engaging and allows learners to practically visualize and associate concepts. So it basically, like it says in the last point, mind mapping allows the individual to break down complicated information. So it's making everything bite-sized. It's you've got so much information about one singular topic. How do you start to organize it? Well, first thing to do is to get it into bite-sized chunks of information, and then you start to make use links to start to give each idea priority, and you start to build a structure, a visual structure in that map. So moving on. So this is our customer journey, if you would, our journey of the user, the student, when using Ideamapper. So these are the things that we kind of encompass: learning, planning, structuring, writing, referencing, and publishing. Now, the learning thing is quite a new one actually for us. It's only really we started to introduce the learning aspect fairly recently, but until then it was the planning stage, which is the mind mapping stage, the structure, which is the interactive element of the software where you can move the map around, the writing, which is again we'll get into that, but it's the word processing functionality, the referencing, which is really important, and then publishing. So being able to publish in whatever format you want to publish in, whether it be a presentation or whether it be a Word document or whatever that might be. So these are all the things I'm going to cover today. So the learning aspect, the planning aspect, the structure, the writing, the referencing, and the publishing. The whole essay life cycle, if you would. Because the learning one is quite a new thing, I'm going to come back to that at the end, if that's all right. I'm going to start off with planning, move on from there, and then towards the end, I'm going to explain how we're using mind mapping to help students learn concepts rather than plan and write. I really want to show how Ideamapper is used for students from grade 2, grade 3, all the way up to university, higher education in the learning element, and really increasing information retention using sort of visual learning styles. So planning document. I'm going to get straight into it now. So like I said at the start, I'm going to keep flicking between the PowerPoint and the actual program. So the PowerPoint's for us to just to understand the key points I'm trying to get across, and then I'll bring it up in the program and try to reproduce what we've just discussed. So I've got a little screenshot on the right hand side. That is how Ideamapper looks. What I've done is typical at the start of any mind map, you just get all your ideas down. It's called a brain dump. So brain dump all the points you want to discuss in your document, no matter how relevant you think it may be. So this example is about a book called To the Lighthouse, and I have just literally mapped everything I know about it. I've mapped the characters, I've mapped the themes, I've mapped, anything that I think that I want to discuss is on there, whether it's needs deleting later on down the line or merging with another concept. It's just all there. At this point, there's no order. There's no order to the map. There's no, everything is equal. Every point, there is a few different sizes, but there's no priority. They're all the same priority, and that's why they're all orange at the moment, because nothing is more important or less important than the other. So what I've seen, again, I'll show this in the program in a minute, but if you can see what I've done on the first screenshot is I've started to order. So I've moved them around and I've started to group things together that I want to talk about. So you can see I've got an introduction and conclusion in there, but the first group I put together is all about the voyage out. So I've got the Virginia Woolf and early life and all that good stuff, and started to create sections. Then what I've started to do is to link the ideas together. So you can see the second screenshot is what I've done is connected the main idea, the central idea. So I've actually made that bigger so it can stand out. And I've started to connect all of my sections. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 sections there, including the introduction and conclusion. So now I've structured my document or my map. That's my first structure. So the map forms the structure of a document with 6 main sections. The order of the map can be changed by dragging any of the ideas around the central one. So the order is clockwise motion. So introduction is number 1 and conclusion is number 6. So it is like a clock face. Imagine a clock face has just been plonked on top of that map. As long as you go clockwise, which is right, that is the order of the document. So for example, Virginia Woolf is 2, and then early life is 2.1, and influences are 2.2, and then Henry David is 2.2. Sorry, 2.21. So you can start to understand the order of how that's achieved. So every point, whether it's the early life point or whether it's a lighthouse, it's still in that clockwise format. So at this point, I can start to delete links. I can start to chop and change. So I think the best way of describing this now is bringing up the program and showing how I'm going to do this. So this is the Ideamapper program I'm showing you now. It's a live document. So as you can see, there's a little bit of a delay. So sorry if there's a delay. I think it's about a 2-second delay. But as I'm moving these things around, this is like I said, this is how I'm going to start grouping things together. So I'm thinking, right, well, I want to talk about all these points here. I've already started to do this, as you can see. I've already started to put characters in the right sort of area, but this is me just grouping some of my ideas that I've put together. I might decide this is irrelevant, so I can just press delete and just get rid of that. Or I can bring it back. And I start to just form some sort of structure. Now, what I'll do then is say, right, to the lighthouse, that's my main idea. I've actually made this bigger, I've not shown that, but I can make it bigger or make it smaller. The reason I like to make the central idea bigger is just so it stands out. So it's very clear that this is my central idea. And then there's many ways of connecting ideas. The quickest way is by holding the Shift button on your keyboard and then just clicking where you'd like it to attach to. The same applies if I'm clicking here. I can connect this by just clicking just keeping hold of Shift and pressing the one I want to connect it to. Another option is to create links, and I can click the central idea and then click all the links, just like that. The third way of doing it is by dragging the idea and moving it over the idea you want to connect it to. You'll see a little timer. It's running a bit slow today, but you'll see a little timer. And there you go. I'm running the beta version at the moment, so it will run a little bit slower than it should, but there it is. The one thing I should mention as well is, it just happens to be the way I've done this. what I've done, I've took a map I've already completed and deleted all the links and started again. So just want to show you how to create one from scratch. New document. This is what it looks like when you start off using Ideamapper. So it already wants you to enter a title, so let's put my name. Press enter, and that creates my idea. And then it automatically opens another one for me to start working on. Or I can just double click anywhere on the screen to enter a new one. Every time I press enter, it just creates another one for me to start writing whatever I want to write. And I can just keep going and keep going. Like I said, this is very interactive, so I can just move these around the map to start to create a little bit of an idea of how I'm going to structure everything. And again, start to make these connections. So one thing you'll see about on this map is the colors start to change. Didn't do it on my original map because I'd already actually created a map, so I'd overrid it and made everything orange. But when you start off a new map, it starts to differentiate the level of the map by the color. So that one turns blue, and you'll notice that the lines get a little bit thinner every time I create a new level. The line gets slightly thinner every time. I think that's the thinnest it goes to, though. There's no thinner after that. But you can see I'm starting to create a bit of a map. I don't have to have it in this format. I can have it in any of these formats up here in my ribbon. So this is a sideways layout. I can have a star layout. You just click that to make a star layout. I can have a top down. I can have a top up, to the side, timeline, all sorts of different layouts. Or I can have a very linear style layout. So very straight lines. It hasn't got that organic view which we had a minute ago. Completely depends on how you like to work. Black lines are a little bit boring sometimes, so you can make nice colors, increase the thickness of the line, start putting arrows in there. You can start to customize your map a little bit more then. And the straight lines tend to work better for the more linear layouts, like the top down or the bottom down. You start to create more of a flow chart type of diagram rather than a typical star layout mind map, and you can start to work that down just like a like a flow chart. So that's how to create an idea. That's how to manipulate ideas. That's how to put them in some sort of structure. So I'm going to move back to my PowerPoint. Yeah. So that's the planning stage. That's me just getting all my thoughts down, creating a map, just like you would on a pen and paper. Just like you just want to get your ideas down, create a bit of a map, and you start to color code your map, start creating different links, start changing the colors just to try and get a structure together. Get all your ideas onto a canvas, and then move on from there. So to structure the document, so I've already kind of just covered this a little bit with the changing the colors, but you can add clip art, change the colors of the document to suit the user. Colors and clip art help to create visual cues for the brain, which they do, yeah. So you can start to, you'll notice that Ideamapper already starts to create colors for you, but you can start to color by chapter or color by section. So you can see in this screenshot here, themes and ideas is just been done all blue. So that in my head, that I know that themes and ideas is blue. And then for the structure, for example, I've got some of the clip art that I'm going to show you in a minute. I've even changed the central idea to clip art because it's still a lighthouse, and I've put a lighthouse in the middle. You can add things like table of contents, images, and tables, which I'm going to show you. And you can use the map to put into a 3D mode to manipulate larger maps. and then you can also minimize sections. So that's what I'm going to show you now. Okay. So at the moment, map is pretty boring, if you would. There's not really that much going on. You know, I start to connect my ideas. Just like that. But because I've not really color coded anything, it's just all orange at the moment, which doesn't really help me from a visual point of view. Start to clearly differentiate from just looking at the map. You know, I can't really differentiate the different sections because they're all the same color. There's not much difference in size. You know, there's not much, not many colors, not much. There's no clip art. There's no visual cues for me whatsoever. So as I'm starting to connect these ideas, what I'm thinking about doing is now adding clip art and changing the colors of each section to start to make it a little bit more visually easy for me to start to differentiate some of these concepts. So the first thing I might do is open clip art in my tool section up here. Press my clip art, and now I've got a load of clip art here. So I can either search for a particular image that I might want. Use a light bulb, lighthouse. I want to use a lighthouse. I'm going to use this one, a little bit different. So there's my lighthouse. I'll just back into that. It's still searching. I'm just going to stop that. Move back. And I might just want to start adding some random stuff. I'm not going to search too much. I'm just going to start putting clip art into it. So you can see I'm just drilling down into each section, looking for some clip art to use. So all I'm going to do is drag it and hover it over one of my ideas, and that replaces the circle with just some clip art. Alternatively, I can just drag it straight into my document, and that will create an idea for me. So this idea is just the same as all these other circles, it's just in clip art form, and I can just create a new name for that. And then I can start to make the connections. So eventually, it's one of them, here's what I did earlier sort of things, but you can end up making your map look pretty colourful, and with plenty of clip art images in there to just remind you of what the area is. So the characters, that's quite a good picture to remind me of the characters, because just people, structure, themes, introduction, all the rest of it. And all I've done with the colours, I've just changed the colours of the lines. Now because the way we do our organic layouts, these colours basically decide whatever colour this central idea is. So it's decided this central idea is green, and then fades the colour out to the whatever colour we're going to. So this is purple, this is green, so it's gone from green to slightly lighter green. For me to change that, all I've got to do is change the colours. So there's a colour behind this, so I'll just go to style, change the colour to maybe purple, and then that will change the central idea to purple colour, and then all those lines start to become faded purple. And I can continue doing this as much as I like, just keep changing the colours. I'll change it to green. I can change each idea if I like, each subtree to a different colour, or I can just select a whole bunch of colours, or sorry, a whole bunch of ideas, and just change the colour of everything. So if I want, I can start defining each section by a colour. Doesn't matter if I've got clip art, because the line is also a colour. So I can say, right, that's my green section. Characters, I want that to be sort of coral, if you would. There's only a select number of colours in my little drop-down menu. So if I want to add more colours, I could just right click, go to appearance, go to then fill color. Oh, I lost that, there we are. And I've got a lot of colors I can choose from, or I can just pick a screen color, or I can add RGB or hue or whatever I've got to add. So your customization is really broad. You can have as many colors. You can have the company colors, the school colors, you know, whatever colors you want to reflect in your map. What was the other thing I was mentioning on that? Okay, yeah, so 3D mode. So this is quite a small map, really, in the grand scheme of things. However, there is only so much room to map, you know, before I start having to zoom out. You see I've got some other artifacts knocking around. I'll discuss all that stuff. I'll just put them out of the way for the time being. But if I want to start really adding to this map and start to make it a lot, you know, a lot bigger, I'm going to have to zoom out. And the problem is when I zoom out, everything becomes smaller, harder to read, especially if I'm working on a very small laptop or a tablet sort of style laptop. It's going to be very hard for me to really read this. That's why colors kind of come into it in somewhere in pictures, but ultimately you want to be reading the words. So let me just zoom back in. So we've got a thing called 3D mode. You can access it down here in the bottom right hand corner where I'm circling. Now 3D puts everything on an angle for me. So I can manipulate that angle by using these roller bars at the side. So I can find what sort of angle I want to use this at. I might want to bring it right down, and then I can start to move and create. You can see how much more space has been created. And I've not zoomed in anymore, I've not zoomed out. Because I've put the entire map on an angle, I can start to make a lot more use of the space. And you can imagine if I had a large map, how much room this would save me. At the moment, I've only got a fairly small map, so I've got lots of open spaces that I can still use. But for much larger maps, putting it on a 3D mode really opens up that third dimension and creates a lot more space. And I can manipulate that just by using these roller bars here. I can move through the maps. I can also focus on areas of one map at a time, so I can just leave it at characters and then just focus on this area of the map first, start to add information, you know. And whereas themes and ideas is at the back, that's kind of out of the way at the moment. Conclusions at the back, out of the way. You know, once I've dealt with Lighthouse, I can just move across the structure and really start doing the structure. The grid map put people off as well. Sometimes that's quite conflicting, so you can just turn that off. And then just move through the map, one section at a time. This is a good tool to use and to help students understand priorities and what things to work on at what particular time. So, for example, the Virginia Wolf is right at the back. I'm not even, you know, I can still move it around so I can see some of the stuff, but it's at the back, and everyone knows that the back is not important. It's at the front. The front's the things you need to focus on. So this really puts it at the forefront of my mind and says, right, that's what I'm focusing on right now. And as I move across, I can start to focus on different areas of the map and not really having to worry about anything else, because this is at the forefront of the map and this is at the forefront of my mind. You've got to be careful though when you use 3D, because when you change the structure in 3D mode, it also changes it in your map. So you've just got to press something like auto arrange. That brings everything back into the center again. So the button I pressed was next to 3D mode, and this is auto arrange. Now if I keep auto arrange on and I move things through the map, it automatically moves everything around for me. Now it may not necessarily be the particular layout that I want. I may not want it laid out like this, but if you're using things like the top-down menu for like the linear layouts, where you're doing sort of flow charts and that sort of thing, having also arrange turned on all the time really does help. I'm going to turn it off for now though, because I really like to have my map And now I've turned it off, it won't snap anything back into place. But I like to have my map really just all over the place, really. I like to have them just plonked around. Okay, I'm just going to zoom back in. So that's 3D mode. Another way of focusing on particular areas of the map at once is when I hover over an ID. I've already mentioned you can make these IDs bigger and smaller, but there is another icon here. Press that, and that minimizes the areas of the map. So I can just minimize everything, and I can then begin to focus on, right, I just want to focus on characters right now. I don't want to get distracted with all the other things going on in my map. I've got my initial structure here, but for characters, I just want to focus on these 4 characters and condense my map. That's another great tool to use when you've got large maps. Imagine if you mainly have 5 key points, but you may go off on many other tangents throughout the map and then create very large maps. So if you minimize everything, you can just stick to your core ideas and then focus on the things you want to expand on one section at a time. And then as I want to expand on them again, just press the button again and it just expands the list. Just like that. Same goes no matter what area of the map, so I can just create another idea. Link that idea there. And then now I've got the option to minimize that. And I can keep doing that throughout the map. Oh yeah, so next thing I want to talk about was table of contents, tables and images. So I've already got a table of contents up on here. A lot of people use a table of contents to, well, sometimes a lot of the time it's a requirement actually for reports and especially for word counts and just to help navigate such large documents when you've got it printed out. You want to know what each section contains. So we have a live table of contents that you can add in. Now, it does say there's loads of words because I've not got to the writing section of it yet, but this will become very clear when I start to discuss the writing element. But yeah, we've added a table of contents in here. I'll show you how to do that in a second. But it gives me a running word count of each section. It also tells me what percentage of my word count each section takes up. So I can see my characters takes up 18.7% of my words. Now, if I've already planned out and I've said, right, I want 4 sections with the equal amounts of information, I'm going to be looking for around the 25% for each. So for characters, 25. I'm going to be looking for themes, 25. I'm looking for the structure at 25. This is at 32, so this is a bit out of balance at the moment. As I start to write more in characters, this will bring the word count up and then bring this average down. So it's a great way of making sure that you don't go off track and you're not writing too much information in one area. And it makes you become accountable for your word count. Not only does it just tell you how many words are in your total document, but it starts to say, well, this is how many words you put into each section. And you can start to easily identify areas you may have not discussed, you need to discuss further, or that you've discussed too much. This is a live document, so it changes every time you add text or delete text. And the way to add one of these is just by right-clicking on your canvas, go into New, and then just go into Table of Contents. Just gone right past it. There it is. And there it is. So you just double-click that. This is a new one, so it's not connected to any ideas, so there's nothing on it. When you start to connect it, you'll see it connects all the ideas and gives you a word count. So I'm going to get rid of that now. The other things I want to show in this little section are including images. So I can add an image. Now this is not an image, this is not clip art, this is not something that I'm using on top of my ideas to help me sort of structure. this is something I want to actually discuss in my document. So it's a picture I want to maybe reference, or a figure that I want to discuss. So I'm going to put in a map, for example. So here's my picture of a map that I want to include. Now I can call it whatever image I want. So I might call it a concept map. I can put a caption in there if I want. Is it a figure? Is it a diagram? Is it an image? Well, it's a diagram for me. And then I just click off of that. And then there it is on my map. So it's not as clear as the clip art because I've not entered it as a clip art image. I've entered it as a map, as an actual image. So you can see in the bottom right hand corner, there's like a little square, and that tells me that it's an image. And this is, again, so I can just connect to my introduction. And then if I double click that, it shows me the image. And I can start to reference this image, but I'll talk about referencing later on. Or I can start to add it to any of the sections. And this will also appear in my document as well. Okay, so that's the structure of the document. Now onto the writing. Again, so if you look at the screenshots, you can enter text directly from the map by double-clicking the idea. So just like I double-click that image and it brought the image up, if I double-click on any of the ideas, there's an element of text behind each idea. So again, going back to that bite-sized chunks of information that we discussed and the benefits of mind mapping, it's all about using the map to create as many little chunks of information as you can, and then the map brings it all together in a structure. So the one thing that's unique about us is we've got a split screen view. So you can see the second image screenshot there. I've got the map on the left and I've got the text on the right. So as I'm moving that map around and as I'm entering information, that's reflected either on the map or reflected on the text. So yeah, so I can write in the text whilst being able to manipulate the map. So it's not just an image or a picture of my map, it's still live. I can still manipulate the map, I can still add information, take information away. But I can also see how that how that influences my text as well. The map also serves as a visual cue to remind the user what section of the document they're writing in relation to the whole document. So this is great for especially the larger sections. So if I'm writing about Mr. Ramsey, for example, it may have took me an hour, 2 hours, maybe 3 hours to talk about Mr. Ramsey. And in that 3 hours, I've definitely forgot what I was definitely not as clear to me what section I'm actually discussing. If I've got the map on the left, I can actually see, oh, well, I'm in characters because it's highlighted the fact that I'm in characters and I'm talking about one of the characters. And the section I've got before that was the Virginia Woolf, and I know that I'm the third point in. This is after the second point after the introduction. I can start. It becomes a lot clearer as to where I am in that document. Like I said, the map serves as a visual cue, reminding you whereabouts in that document you are, what's next after Mr. Ramsey, what's before that, and it stops you from getting stuck in just this mess of black text on a white background, not really understanding what's next, and you've got to go back to your map and figure out, oh, okay, this is where I am, and then go back to your text box. So having a split screen view not only helps you structure your document at the same time as writing it, but it also, like I said, serves as that visual reminder of whereabouts you are in that document, and constantly paints that picture for you. So I'm going to show you this in the document now. So back to my map again. Okay, I'll just move things around. So each idea has got, if I double click it, just like I double click this map before, show me the image. I'm going to double click the introduction. Now, I've got a bit of a quote in the introduction. This is not a completed essay, by the way, but there is the text. Now I can just write in whatever I like in this text. I can just start talking. I can start to format my text. I can bold it, underline it, change the color, do all that stuff. change the font, change the size. I can do my spell check here. I can do my text-to-speech here, which I'll discuss later on. Go for my phrase bank. I'm not sure if I've loaded my phrase bank in this version. No, I don't think I have. But yeah, this is where I can start to input text. Now this is if I want to ask this particular paragraph. I don't want to even look at anything else. I just want to purely talk about an introduction. This is a good technique to use when you've just done when you just come out of a lecture, or you've just done some research into one topic, and that's the information you've got in your mind. You don't want to confuse it with anything else. So right, okay, I've just learned about Mr. Ramsey. I've got a really interesting point I want to discuss. I'm just going to double click him, and I can just start adding to that section. I can just start to write in here what I've just learned about Mr. Ramsey, and without even getting confused with any of the text. I don't want to bring my entire document up and then start getting put off by any other text I've wrote or any other information I've wrote. I just purely want to focus on Mr. Ramsey right now and start to enter the information in. Which is great for note taking, but you want to write a complete document. Having to go into each one of these ideas individually to write the text can be a bit of a pain. So what we've got is a split screen view. Now I can access it down here, just like I can access, this is like my quick access, but I can also go to view and click map and text view. Now, obviously that makes my window pane a little bit small, so I'm just going to move over to the section I'm talking about. Now what you can see is I've got the map on the left, again, still a live document, and I've got all that bite-sized chunks of information. All these text boxes I've just opened are all compiled now on the right-hand side, and the order depends on the order of the map. So the introduction information I had earlier, that's number 2 in the map, because my table of contents is number 1 in the map. Oh, my characters. So like I said, that information I've just put into Mr. Ramsey is right there now. That nonsense bit of text I put in, but it's there. Now I can either start editing my document here, or I can again go back and enter the text individually. So this is my document on the right hand side. Now if I want to change the order, if I said, right, I've actually got Mr. Ramsey, and I've got Mr. and Mrs. Ramsey. So if I want to talk about Mrs. Ramsey first, instead of me having to copy Mrs. Ramsey and paste it above Mr. Ramsey, all I've got to do is just change the way these are laid out. So now I've got Mrs. Ramsey first, Mr. Ramsey second, and that's reflected here. Oops, I'm all over the place here. This is reflected here in the characters section. So Mrs. Ramsey, Mr. Ramsey. Or I can say, you know what, I don't even want to talk about Mrs. Ramsey in characters. Mrs. Ramsey is irrelevant in this point. I really want to put it in Virginia Woolf, for example. That's where she plays most of her part. So that's where I want to put it. And I want to put it under influencers because Mrs. Ramsey is an influencer.
Sorry, Callum, just while you're just taking a breath there, there is actually only 7 minutes to go. We haven't had any questions come in, so I didn't kind of stop you earlier. I probably should have, because I just looked at your PowerPoint. You've got a little bit to go, but we've only got 7 minutes to go.
Okay, so. Well, I'm kind of at I can speed things up a little bit now. I can talk about Ideamapper for ages, and it can sometimes run over a little bit. So sorry if I've not been keeping track of time, and I will move on a little bit faster now. So yeah, you can understand what's going on there. So depending on how I change my structure is depending on the order of my document. So what happens with the document now? Well, I've wrote it. Here's my images that I've inserted earlier. I've got a list of a table of contents. Well, I've got to reference it now. So the window, let me say, I've got to add a reference. So it's very similar to adding a reference into Microsoft Word. We have a referencing tool. You just click the word button, add reference up here. Now you can either reference another part of your document, or you can add a bibliographic reference. Now you can see I've already got a list of references here that I've already put into this document. But let's say I want to create a new reference. So what that does is adds a reference list, a reference section to my document, but it also brings up this referencing tab. So if I decide I want to reference a book, it automatically gives me all the information I need to enter to reference a book. So I fill all this information in, author, first name, last name, and then once I've completed that, I just exit out, and then that creates a reference title. Now this can be APA, it could be Harvard, it could be any referencing style, whatever university uses. But in the document, it will just show whatever the reference title is, whatever I decide to call it. And depending on if you clicked APA or Harvard in the setup, depending on when you click preview or print, it will actually show the Harvard style or the APA or whatever it is you've chosen. And then I also have a list of references at the bottom, so it's a little bit confusing at the moment because I've got about loads of different references and I've not really tied them up properly. But normally you'll just have a one list of references at the bottom, and bibliography is what it is, and that's automatically added as soon as you add a reference in. So once you've completed, once your document's ready to go, you've added your reference in, you've got a few different options now. You can just press print and you can print your document straight off. I've got it in a report format at the moment, but you can change it to an essay format, however you prefer to do it. So you can see my table of contents is here, it tells me what page each section's on. Got my images in there that I added. Some sections aren't complete. I've not chosen my referencing style yet, so that's why it comes up as a Spark Notes, because I've called everything Spark Notes. But as soon as I enter my referencing style, I can choose APA, and then it'll lay it out in an APA format or Harvard format. So I'm just going to jump back to my PowerPoint because I'm conscious of time. Sorry, I overran on that one. That was poor timekeeping on my part. But yeah, so you can reference images, you can reference diagrams, figures, just as you would do in Word, just as you would do in any other document processing sort of software. We're trying to make it as easy as possible to reference your figures or your diagrams, or just referencing text full stop. Like I said, bibliographies are automatically added. So yeah, that's the referencing side of things. And then publishing, you can publish in whatever format you really like. So you can do it as an Ideamapper document, you can export it to Word or export it to PowerPoint. So the best thing about exporting to PowerPoint is, say you've just done a map and you need to actually present your ideas. Sometimes the best way to present your ideas is using PowerPoint, just like I'm presenting my ideas now using PowerPoint. So all you've got to do is save as a PowerPoint document, and then it automatically, this is a screenshot. This is took no formatting whatsoever. It automatically puts each idea as its own slide. So I've actually got that I can show you before I finish. So to the lighthouse. So all I've done now is just press export to PowerPoint, and this is exactly how it looks. So my table of content is a bit more formatting, but very easy to format now. Every section, some of them I'm not even entering information in there, but the ones I have entered information, puts it straight in there. So I can then present my ideas to someone, whether it's in front of a classroom or whether it's just to present them to my boss, whatever it might be. It's all ready to go. We also have a presenter mode built into Ideamapper. This will be released in our next edition, next couple of weeks. But that basically, as you cycle through your text view, it also shows you at the same time where you are on the map. How am I doing for time, Jane? Have I got a couple of minutes or?
No, not really. You've got a minute.
Not really. I've got a minute.
Probably the price structure is probably one of the questions we've had. So I don't know if you wanted to go to that one.
Yeah, I can go to that. We've got time to talk about the visual learning, but
yep,
the learning.
Quick. Yep.
Yeah, okay. So we have got a section on our website called visual learning. The best way to learn about visual learning, how we use Ideamapper to support the learning process for students, is by simply going onto our website, clicking the visual learning tab, and there's loads of videos about the benefits of visual learning and how we use things like concept maps and cause and effect maps to help or increase memory retention, to understand the relationships between different concepts. So you can see here I've got a cause and effect map where the sun links to, so I've got the sun, I've got gravity, and I've got a force that keeps on the ground. Well, it's definitely gravity, so then I make that link. So that's for the younger kids, and then I've got a concept map above that, which shows the relationship between soil and how valuable it is and all the rest of it. So if you really want to get some information there, either email me directly or look on our website under the visual learning tab, and there's loads of information there. So we've had some questions about pricing. This is our multi-user pricing list. So $45 per license per year for anywhere between 20 and 49 licenses. Now what I've got in front of me, just give me a second, is the individual one.
So we'll keep recording, so if people have to head off to their next meeting, you'll be able to catch up with the end of the presentation when we put the video up.
Yep.
And
there's one Q&A I'll answer. Sorry to interrupt you, Callum. There's one Q&A which I'll answer in a moment about integration with other programs. But Callum, I just want to go back to the software and just quickly give everyone just a quick snapshot of those templates. Like there's one there with the essay writing academic one. Do you know what I mean?
So let me just go back to my templates. So is it we're talking about in the program or in the?
Yes, in the program. So when you go to File and go to new from template document, open document. It might be worth looking at some of those higher education ones that have those writing frames and sort of thing to help a student not start with a blank page.
Yeah, so we've got either examples, which these are updated, or we've got new from template. So here you can, you've got, these are blank basically, there's nothing filled in. These are structures already wrote out for you. So you can just find the structure that suits you and then move into it, and then it already plans out your introduction, your conclusion, and what you need to be including really. So it already.
I was thinking of the phrase banks one. That one had some interesting when you put it to.
Oh, the phrase one's quite a large one, yeah.
Yeah, but it just gives people an idea of how far you can take the program to what depth.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, these maps can go really
Could we open one up and show everyone the split view of the map and text just quickly?
In one of the larger ones, yeah.
Yeah.
No problem. So this is laid out. It's not the most colourful map of all, but I'll just bring that up. I've got about 1 million tabs open on my computer at the moment, so sorry if it's running a bit slow. So this is a split screen view. Like I said earlier, the map is, when you get much larger maps like this, it's sometimes hard to see. So I can put that map into a 3D mode if I like.
But when you click on each section of the map, it goes straight to that section of the document.
Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah, so I can. Yes. So I can click on this section, for example, and that takes me to that area of the map on the right hand side on the document. So I can do any of these, and it takes me straight there. It's great for a revision tool as well. So people are revising in different areas. You can just click on the map, and then it gives you the information straight away. Is that what you want to discuss, Jim? Sorry, I don't know if I've understood.
Oh no, that was great. Yeah, that was great. Yeah. I thought it'd be useful for people to see that you can be used to create quite a large essay.
So again, I can only apologise for running over. I'm sorry. I just kind of get carried away with myself sometimes. Sorry I didn't manage to go into as much detail towards the end. But if you want to check out our pricing structure, again, go on our website. You can see individual pricing for subscription, for perpetual, and then if you want to look at site licenses, that dramatically reduces in price. So feel free to send an email to check that out. Is there any questions that I need to answer? Just.
I've got a question from Kerry Preedy about, does Ideamapper work with Glean, Audio Notetaker, and Read and Write? Callum, you mentioned that it does integrate with read write. People need that, but we've got text-to-speech support anyway.
We've got
within
text-to-speech support
Ideamapper.
anyway. Yeah.
So I'm guessing things like Glean, Audio Notetaker, and Read and Write, you might use them in different ways. Glean and Audio Notetaker are note-taking, but then again, you've captured notes in a lecture, but then after that first step, that's where Ideamapper comes in, because you'll import all that text and what you gain from it to start to organize and structure your thoughts and how everything relates and make meaningful connections, because in a lecture you'll get a lot of new information and new learning, new concepts that you have to grapple with. And mind map is a good way to create that structure, to put in what you already know about structures and connect new learning to what you already know. So that's one of the benefits of visual mapping, is to make build on prior knowledge and build learning retention from making those connections. I hope that answers that question for Kerry.
Yeah, hopefully so. Yeah, she says thanks. But yeah, if you have any integration issues or questions, again, just pop us an email. If there's a particular program that you'd like to use Ideamapper with, now's probably the time to send that information over, because we're in, you know, now is the time in our development office is really the main focus is integrating as many softwares, outside softwares, into Ideamapper as possible. So if you've got anything that you like to use regularly or your students use regularly, send it over, because now is probably the time to bring that to light.
And in terms of integration, like if you've been a prior inspiration user, you can import your old inspiration mind maps into Ideamapper.
Yeah, you can. So yeah, I know I did mention that earlier, but one of the questions said, yeah, we've used inspiration before. Some of you may know that inspiration are no longer operating at the head office anymore. I think they've licensed the remainder of the product to Tech Ed Marketing, but there will be no further development. So we've partnered up with Basic Sports Inspiration said, and we've asked them if we can use an inspiration importer. So we've got an inspiration importer now in our program. So any old inspiration files that you've currently got, you can just upload it into Ideamapper, and you can continue editing using it and have all the added benefits of the customization, the split screen that Ideamapper provides.
Right. And the other thing, an open invitation to everyone who's joined today, if you'd like to have a follow-up one-on-one, I'm happy to run a short webinar with you to go back over today's points that Callum's covered. And you know, we look forward to conversations, because, you know, in my role, there is a whole toolkit of tools that our students require, and, you know, visualization is a very important part of that for a lot of students who struggle with language and you know, rely heavily on visual learning.
Excellent. Well, thank you both for that. It's a brilliant presentation, and yeah, sorry I let you go on too long as well, but I yeah, because see no questions were coming in, so I thought we'd be fine, but then yeah, the last two or three slides took longer than I thought.
Yeah,
so
sorry
thank
about
you. Thank you for waking up so early and showing
That's
us the bright skies of the UK. It's absolutely brilliant. Do you have a slide? Do you just want to put up your slide with your contact details?
I do, yeah.
Yep, before we finish up. And thank you, Jim, for managing the chat box as well, and for joining the presentation today.
Right, thank you.
To everybody else.
So this is me, Callum at ideamapper.com. You can just send me an email, or you've got Jim at ideamapper.com as well. Any of us happy to answer any questions or organise any further training.
Excellent. Well, thank you both, and thank you everybody for attending, and sorry we went over time, and thank you to the captioner for their flexibility of staying on as well. Have a great day, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.